Hello. Today we are joined by our mascot, Little Pixel. Hi, Pixel. You going to help us talk about an accountability program? All right. Okay, so that is the topic of today. It is Epiphany number 11. And it is have a public or semi-public accountability program. So let's get into that. Essentially what a accountability program is something you do with at least one other person, but preferably with a group of people. And in today's environment, probably going to be doing this on some kind of chat. Probably not like a phone call or webinar, though you could do it in a webinar where you meet maybe once every couple of days or even once a day if you really want to. But it's probably best done through a chat message or a SMS group of some sort. And the idea is that what you're doing is probably on an ongoing basis, if it's a chat group, is you're publicly confessing what your activity was for the time period, probably for the day, or maybe you do it throughout the day, and then people comment on it, or they check in on you to see how you're doing. And the idea is that you're, by confessing publicly, if you will, or at least in the sense of publicly mean this group, is you're laying bare what it is that you've done, or perhaps what it is that you haven't done. One of the most productive times in my career, a couple times actually, I had a form of, one time it was an accountability program, if you will. We didn't call it that, but it was about three of us that met once a day, or we talked with each other once a day, 5 days a week. I did this for about 6 or 7 months, and that's how I built my second phase of my business when I moved to California back in 1999. And then another time, maybe 10 years later, maybe a little bit less than 10 years later, I actually joined a formal accountability program, which was we spoke, I think it was twice a week, and it was on the phone from all across the country. It was maybe 15, 20 people, and we paid money for them. We paid, I remembered exactly, $166 a month that this guy organized. He actually wasn't part of our company. He was an outside consultant. Did that for probably also right around 6 months. And I didn't even know all the people that were on the call. I knew some of them. As I mentioned, 15, 20 people, something like that. And it really helps. It really works. So that's the essence of, let's get into kind of the three big advantages of having some kind of accountability program. The first one is, as I've alluded to, is public confession, where the fact that you know other people are going to be seeing or hearing or observing or learning what it is you've done, just knowing that's going to happen makes you do more. It makes you follow through on the commitments that you've given, right? And there was a famous study, or a study done called the Hawthorne effect, and that was back in, well, the person that studied it was a gentleman named Landsberger, Henry Landsberger. It was based on a study that was conducted between 1924 and 1932, and basically what they want to check with factory workers is when would they perform best. And the long and short of it is when there was lots of light in their space, physical light, and they knew that they were being observed by managers, they would work harder and work better and be more productive. Now we kind of take that for granted. Now, hey, if someone's watching, I'm going to do better. But remember, this is almost 100 years ago, and they realize that it actually really does work. And you know that you can common sense it, that when you're being observed, or when you know that people are going to learn what it is that you've done, you tend to do better, or you tend to follow through upon your commitments, and it works. It's one of those psychological tricks. It is to some degree a trick. It is a technique. And even though you know that it's a technique, and you also know that the other people probably kind of almost don't even really care, they got their own stuff going on, it still matters. Just like you might say, it doesn't matter, I don't care what people think about me. Sure you do. That's why you wear clothes that match. That's why you take a shower and wear cologne. And that's why you behave a certain way, because it may not sound as like you're independent, but the truth is we do care. Now, there's obviously we can care too much. But to pretend that you don't care, of course you care. You care how people think about you, even if it's for a fleeting moment. But you want to use that as an advantage. So instead of fighting that, is embrace it and use it to your advantage, even though you know it's a technique, right? You know that it's just a psychological trick, but it still works. And instead of fighting it, use it to your advantage, right? So that's the first benefit. The second benefit is that you get honest feedback from people. Hey, John, you need to work a little harder. Hey, wow, I'm really proud of you. You did more than you said you would. Or, hey, we've got 2 days left. That type of feedback. Now, obviously, you want to be part of a group or be with someone or be with another partner that is, respectful, that is not going to bag on you, but also gives you a little bit of a hard time, and vice versa. You want to do the same thing for them. And that may take a little bit of fine tuning to find the right person or get the right group of people together. But I think most mature adults are probably going to do it the right way. A little bit of ribbing, but not too much, but just enough so that you don't want to be on the butt end of that all the time, right? The other thing I'll tell you about that is, I wouldn't, for those of you, most of you watching this are probably financial advisors in some form, and maybe some of you aren't financial advisors, you're just in sales, but either way, I don't think it matters that the people are necessarily in the same branch or even in the same company. Possibly not even in the same industry, as long as you're all kind of have the same sales system, sales routine. I think it doesn't matter. If you're maybe you're friends, or maybe you used to work together and now you work somewhere else, but you're in the same kind of business, you're in the sales business of some sort of advisory business, consultative business, a business where you have to do the same type of things. You have to prospect, you have to follow up, maybe some form of presentation, what have you. I think that's okay, right? As long as everyone's doing the same type of activity, it's going to work. Now, if it's completely disparate, that's obviously not going to fly. But I think that's okay. So it doesn't have to be, and it can be across the country, especially if it's a chat group. It can be different time zones, and then people just respond and react to each other. That's fine. So one of them, though, again, is that feedback, right? Is the feedback you're getting from others about your activity and your not activity, what have you. The third one, very similar, but this one is that you learn from the success and the failures and the trials and tribulations from other people. This is more, not so much about the motivation side of it or them judging you or commenting on your activity. This is more about actual techniques. This is what I found is that a lot of these accountability programs that I've been a part of for years and years and years, most of them in the latter years, running them, so to speak, managing them, but is that they also turn into kind of an impromptu training session. It's not just activity. It starts with activity. I had a prospect today, and they mentioned this or said this. I didn't know how to respond to it. And then someone chimes in and says, "Oh, try this." Or someone says, "Hey, I had a great appointment," or "I thought it went well," and then the client, shocked me by saying this or by saying no. And what does everyone think? And then they chime in. So it can turn into more of a training. So that's excellent. That is one of the best benefits you can have from that. And it's kind of impromptu. People, once they're comfortable in this chat group, or again, whatever system you're using, I'll call it a chat group, is then they'll be willing to give to do that. So that's the essence of it. So I'll give you just two quick kind of two methods or two types. The first one is the buddy system, and the second one is an accountability group. Very similar, but not quite the same. So the buddy system, just like it sounds like, is essentially just you doing it with another person. That's the way it was way back in the day before the internet or SMS, text messages became popular, because it'd be hard to get more than a couple of three people together. You could do it by phone, but maybe you're in the office together and one or two people or maybe three people that are in the office at the same time, and the personality meshes. But because you were limited with basically no internet, you were just limited to geographically where someone was with you and time-wise, right? But that can still work today. Maybe it's even your spouse, but I do recommend, the spouse is okay, but I do recommend someone that's in the business, currently active. You're not looking for just someone that checks in on you. You want them to be doing it as well. You want them to be in the hot seat also, where you're giving them a little bit of accountability feedback, okay? So that's where that's important. But if you just have a buddy, start with that. The second time is basically anyone more than 3 or 4 people. So, 2 or 3 people is a buddy system, but more than that, it becomes a more of a group. And then, of course, you're going to be limited to, some kind of electronic chatting of some sort. And the dynamics are the same, but I think the larger the group, the better. Now, not 100 people, because then you can't weed through all that. But half a dozen to maybe 20 people, that's probably where the ideal is where you can have a group where you have a good dynamic. Because there's always someone or a few people that they say they want to join, but they never really do it. Or when they don't have any success or they don't have activity, they're quiet. And part of that's actually rolling into my next tip. A couple of 3 tips I'll give you here. One of them is that if you do a system, my recommendation is at least during the work days that you've declared are your work days, which isn't always Monday through Friday, but whatever it is, that you have to Publicly confess what you've done or haven't done. And it's okay. Hey, you know what, guys? I blew it today. I didn't do it, or I got caught doing something else, or I just, honestly, I was just lazy. I just didn't do whatever, I said I was going to do, and, sign off. Boom. Whatever. That's okay. That's better than not. And that's what happens is people get embarrassed. And the problem is, instead of absorbing that and accepting it, embracing that, and using it as fuel to get better, they hide from it. They might not quit the group, but they won't confess anymore. And that's 90% of the time, maybe 80-90% of the time, why it doesn't work for people. That's the exact behavior. So once you commit, I'm telling you, at least on the days that you've ahead of time confessed that you're going to work, you have to start. You have to, even if it's 10 days in a row. I didn't do anything today. I'm gonna get better, but I'm still here. And then and then you got to let them rag on you a little bit. They're nothing abusive, but you have to let them give you a little bit of a hard time. That's the whole point. Okay, if you never do anything and you never get any kind of flack or negative feedback, then there's no point. It's all within reason, but that's what you have to do. Pardon me. The other one is, sounds obvious, but you got to make sure you also help other people. If they do well, it doesn't have to be a little thumbs up or just, hey, good job, if it's maybe by phone, hey, congratulations. You don't have to get into a big, long thing, but make sure you give feedback. Feedback is even positive and negative. If it's negative, hey, listen, John, I expected better from you. You get them tomorrow. That's all you got to say. Hey, too bad to hear that you didn't do your 5 prospects, but I'm glad you at least did 1 so that you did something. Better tomorrow. That's all. Quick 1-2 line. That's all it has to be. But I cannot tell you how much of a difference that makes. You got to remember, not only for you, but when you do it to others, right? And the thing is, the reason it's so important publicly, or semi-publicly, it's not just that like I say that to you, right? It's that that other people are seeing my comment as well. So it works both positive. It's not just my comment. That's why the group is a little better than a buddy system, right? But buddy rags on you, it's one thing. But if a buddy rags on you, but 11 other people see that message, or if it's by phone or webinar, maybe you meet once or twice by webinar, and the other people on the webinar hear it, and that makes it tougher. But don't run from it. You've got to embrace it. Okay, you've got to stick. You've got to absorb it. You've got to. A guy that taught me this a long time ago taught me a lot of this stuff, not all of it, but a lot of this. He was $1 million earner in our business, in our industry, I should say. He said you have to be willing to be in the hot seat. That was always his expression about that idea. You've got to. If you run from it, then don't even start. Okay. Again, nothing abusive, but okay. The other tip that I should have led with this, but in my view, my opinion, the most important. There's a few of them, but the most important activity that when it comes to an accountability program to confess about is going to be number 1, prospecting attempts. Okay, you've heard me talk about this at length, right? 1 to 4 prospects every day, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. It's 1,000 brand new prospects a year. And if you do that, you cannot not have success. The second one is the number of first appointments conducted, which should be between 2 and 4 a week in our industry. Okay, so 1 to 4 prospects a day, 5 days a week. Again, you may have a different schedule. This is a generic system that you can then adopt to your liking. And 2 is you want to conduct, not just set up, but conduct 2 to 4 brand new appointments a week. Those, in my view, are the 2 most important metrics that I would make sure you talk about on an accountability program. So the prospecting, obviously, at least once a day. And some people do it different. Some people do it like they literally get off the phone when they prospected someone finally, and they'll message on their phone, hey, I just prospected a guy I've been thinking about prospecting for 2 weeks and finally had the guts to do it. Or they just check in at night and say, here's what I did today. However you want to do it, doesn't really matter. And then other ones, like the appointments, again, you're done with an appointment, you might check in. Or it might be maybe Friday, when the week is essentially over for most people, hey, this week you've reported your prospecting every day, but end of the week you might report your appointments. It doesn't really matter how you set that up, and maybe everyone does it different, or maybe your group does it as a group, and you make the decisions on how you want to run it. Depends how formal, informal you want to be. But I would, whatever you do, and of course I'd still report whenever you close something, or maybe you get a referral or something great happens. Always do that, right? Or you have a question about something. But first and foremost, it is an accountability program, and we all know that when it comes to the accountability, the things that we're looking for are the prospecting for appointments and doing the first appointments, because everything after that is easy. You don't have to work hard for the second appointment. You don't have to work hard to close, right? Because those are just natural evolutions and consequences of doing the first two. But those are hard. Prospecting and then getting that appointment. You do that, everything else just kind of falls. That doesn't mean you don't mention it in your accountability, but those two, whatever you do, that's what I would recommend, is that you definitely at least talk about the prospecting and the appointment and the first visit appointments you've conducted. And that's basically it. Accountability program right there. Hope you enjoyed it and hopefully get some use out of it. Let me know if you have any feedback.